What happens when a duchess with a Hollywood past meets Britain's most unforgiving journalist? You won't believe how fast things spiral when Meghan Markle walks into Kevin O'Sullivan's studio thinking she's in control and leaves in fury. They said it would be a simple interview, but from the very first question, it was clear. Kevin O'Sullivan wasn't playing by the palace's rules. What followed was a verbal brawl so tense even the crew stopped breathing. You've seen interviews get awkward, but nothing like this. The lights in the studio were soft, warm, and deceptively calm. Behind the polished desk, Kevin O'Sullivan adjusted his tie, his expression unreadable. The audience murmured in low anticipation. This wasn't just any guest tonight. It was Meghan Markle, a former actress, a former duchess, and arguably one of the most polarizing women in the world. The side door opened. Meghan stepped out, makeup flawless, her smile poised but tight. She walked with confidence, too much some would say, as if she were walking onto the set of a Vogue cover shoot, not a primetime interrogation. Kevin stood to greet her. "Meghan, welcome. Thank you for being here." She nodded without shaking his hand. "Thanks for having me." As she sat, she crossed her legs and adjusted her lapel like she'd done this 1,000 times. The cameras began to roll. Kevin's tone was smooth, but anyone familiar with him knew that beneath the politeness was a dagger. "So," he began, "from palace walls to podcast studios, from red carpets to royal walkouts, how's life treating you lately?" Meghan smiled coolly. "Busy, but fulfilling. I've finally had the chance to use my voice in the way I always wanted." Kevin leaned forward. "Interesting choice of words. Use your voice. Some would say you've used it to torch everything and everyone in your past." Meghan's smile froze for a heartbeat, then returned sharper. "I tell my story. If that makes people uncomfortable, maybe they need to examine why." The audience murmured. Kevin's eyebrow arched. "Let's rewind, shall we? You began as an actress. Suits, of course. Then the royal family. Now, what would you say your career is?" She tilted her head. "Well, unlike some people, I don't need a label. I'm a mother, a producer, an advocate, and yes, someone who actually does things instead of criticizing from the sidelines." Kevin's smile was thin. "Is that how you see critics? Sideline noise?" Meghan looked directly at the camera. "That's exactly what they are." He nodded slowly. "Fascinating. Let's talk about your acting career then. Ever miss it? Or did you leave that behind the moment a crown was in sight?" The air shifted. Meghan's tone grew colder. "Excuse me?" Kevin didn't flinch. "I said, did your ambitions change once you joined the royal family? Or was that the plan all along?" Meghan's nostrils flared. "I think it's offensive to assume a woman can't fall in love without it being some kind of strategy." Kevin shrugged. "Then explain why everything you've done since stepping away from the family has involved monetizing your relationship with them." The audience stiffened. Meghan gave a small, mocking laugh. "That's such a tired narrative. You know nothing about my decisions. You sit there judging as if you've lived my life." He steepled his fingers. "No, but you've made sure we all know your version of it. So here's a fair question. If the royal family was so toxic, why keep the title? Why still sign emails as the Duchess of Sussex?" Her jaw tensed. "Because it's legally mine, whether you like it or not." Kevin leaned back, voice casual but blade-edged. "So you dislike the institution but keep the perks. That sounds more like a marketing strategy than a principled stand." Meghan uncrossed and recrossed her legs, visibly annoyed. "Maybe if you spent less time obsessing over titles and more time listening to women's voices, we'd have a different conversation." Kevin didn't miss a beat. "Oh, I'm listening. I just don't confuse branding with bravery." The tension had now wrapped the studio in ice. The crew was barely blinking. Meghan's polished exterior had started to crack, just slightly but unmistakably. Kevin flipped a page in his notes. "Let's talk about the Queen. You left when she was still alive. Do you regret not being there during her final years?" Meghan's lips tightened. "I have nothing but respect for the Queen." Kevin raised an eyebrow. "Funny way of showing it. Ditching the country, accusing the family, running to Oprah." "That's not what happened," Meghan snapped. "Isn't it?" Kevin challenged. "Because from the outside, it looks like you lit the match, watched the monarchy burn, and then cried about being too warm. The audience audibly gasped. Meghan leaned forward now, her voice low and cutting. I came on this show expecting professionalism. Clearly, I gave you too much credit. Kevin stared evenly. And I expected answers. Clearly, I gave you too much credit. For a moment, they just stared at each other, frozen, silent, two worlds colliding in a quiet war of wills. Then Kevin sighed and straightened in his seat. Let's talk about your relationship with the royal staff. Dozens of aides reportedly left during your time at the palace. Some say they felt bullied. Any comment? Meghan's face hardened. You mean palace spin? The smear campaign launched the minute I started asking questions? Kevin's tone was icily calm. So everyone else is wrong, and only Meghan Markle is right. Is that the story? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. If that makes you feel better, believe it. Kevin's voice sharpened. No, Meghan, I'm not here to feel better. I'm here for the truth. And the truth is, your narrative falls apart the moment someone challenges it. The studio went silent again. Meghan turned to the audience with a smile that was all teeth. I don't owe this man, or anyone else here, a justification for how I protect my family. Kevin stood up suddenly. Well then, he said, his voice no longer friendly. If you're not here to answer questions, and if you think everyone else is beneath you, perhaps you'd be more comfortable off this set. The audience gasped. Meghan's expression turned to shocked fury. Excuse me? Kevin gestured toward the door. Please, this is a show for dialogue, not diva tantrums. Meghan's chair scraped back. She stood, trembling with indignation. This isn't journalism. This is provocation masked as journalism, and it's pathetic. Kevin didn't budge. Then by all means, leave. And with a glare that could curdle steel, Meghan Markle turned, stormed toward the exit, her heels echoing off the studio floor. Kevin turned to the stunned audience. Apologies, ladies and gentlemen. We now return to regular programming. The screen faded to black, but the internet? It was just getting started. The studio lights still shimmered over Kevin's desk as he calmly flipped through his notes, the air in the room heavy with unresolved electricity. The audience remained frozen in that uncomfortable post-clash silence. No one knew whether to applaud, whisper, or simply breathe again. And then, the door swung open. Meghan Markle returned. She marched back into the room with the same deliberate poise she had entered with, except now every step hit the floor like a challenge. Her jaw was clenched, her posture even straighter. She had ditched the smile. She had ditched the diplomacy. She was back for blood. The audience didn't dare clap. They just watched. Kevin didn't rise. He glanced up at her, pen still spinning idly between his fingers. Well, he said flatly, couldn't stay away. Meghan didn't sit immediately. I left because you were being disrespectful. I came back to finish what I started and make sure people see through your little performance. Kevin tilted his head, amused. Performance? My dear, you arrived here rehearsed like an awards show presenter. She sat down abruptly, folding her arms. Better to be prepared than bitter. He chuckled once, low. Then let's continue, shall we? There was no smile now, just fire. Kevin leaned forward. You say you left the royal family for your mental health, but you knew what you were marrying into. The cameras, the scrutiny, the duty. Are you saying you had no idea? Meghan's response came out sharp, each word a blade. What I didn't know was the cruelty, the racism, the gaslighting. You think I expected to be destroyed from the inside? Kevin didn't blink. And yet you stayed long enough to have a royal wedding, 2 royal tours, a global brand. Sounds more like a launch pad than an escape. Meghan's laugh was humorless. Is that what you tell women when they leave abusive situations? That they got something out of it? The audience murmured. Kevin's tone grew colder. No, I'm asking if you've ever taken a moment to consider that sometimes the problem might not be everyone else. Meghan sat back, visibly rolling her eyes. Right, blame the woman. How original. Kevin didn't let go. You accused the firm of smears, of ignoring your cries for help. You painted your in-laws as villains on global television. And now you come here, Demanding respect? She snapped. I don't demand respect. I deserve it. And if people have a problem with me telling my truth, that's their problem. Kevin raised an eyebrow. Your truth, not the truth? Meghan's lips curled. You really think you're clever? He smiled thinly. You think you're untouchable? She leaned in, her voice low and biting. You're just angry because a woman like me, who came from outside your little aristocratic fantasy, dared to speak. Kevin's expression didn't change, but his next words landed like a punch. Actually, I'm angry because someone with your platform and privilege still acts like a victim in every interview. A few gasps echoed from the audience. Meghan narrowed her eyes. You want to talk privilege? Try being a biracial woman walking into Buckingham Palace and being treated like she didn't belong. Kevin nodded slowly. Let's go there then. You've hinted at racism. You've blamed the institution. But you've never named names, never provided actual proof. Isn't that convenient? Meghan's hands tightened around the armrests. Because I'm not here to destroy individuals. I'm here to expose a system. Kevin leaned forward. A system you profited from, married into, benefited from, until it didn't serve you. Meghan's voice dropped an octave. I didn't marry for benefit. I married for love. He countered. And when love wasn't enough, you sold the pain. A stunned silence. Even Meghan looked momentarily taken aback. You really think you're being brave? Kevin pressed. To smear your husband's family, turn personal pain into profit, and then come here acting like the world owes you grace? Meghan's eyes flared. I'm not asking the world for anything. He nodded. Except book sales, podcast listeners, sympathy, and let's not forget the Netflix millions. She laughed, mocking, disdainful. Oh, please. Like you care about ethics. You're here for the ratings, you provoke, you insult, and when someone pushes back, you play the victim. Kevin didn't flinch. Funny, that's what people say about you. Meghan stood, again, but this time she didn't leave. She hovered. You've been condescending since I sat down. You bring up rumors, distort facts, twist my words, and somehow I'm the problem. Kevin looked up at her calmly. Yes. The word rang out, unapologetic. She blinked, stunned by the directness. You are, he continued, the problem, not because you speak your truth, but because you've turned that truth into a weapon and then cry foul when anyone fights back. Meghan stepped forward toward his desk, voice trembling with rage. You think you're bold? You think you're a truth teller? You're just a sad little man, angry that a woman like me walked away from your outdated world. Kevin stood too. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move, but he stared her down with icy focus. I think, he said evenly, you want the freedom to say anything without consequence. You want to be revered without being questioned. But that's not how it works. Not here. Not anymore. The silence in the studio was deafening. Meghan's eyes shimmered, not with tears but fury. She turned sharply away, biting her tongue. Kevin gave her back a final line like a dagger tossed across the room. If you can't handle hard questions, Meghan, maybe stop signing up for interviews. She paused, then turned halfway back to him. This isn't journalism, it's arrogance. And with that, she stormed off the set for the second time that night. Kevin didn't move, didn't look away, just sat back down, exhaled once and stared into the camera. She wanted the spotlight, he said calmly, and now she's angry it's not flattering. The screen faded to black. But this saga was far from over. Twice she walked out, and twice she stormed back in. But the third time, there was no turning back. Meghan Markle returned with fire in her veins, ready to fight. But what she didn't expect was Kevin O'Sullivan had saved the deadliest questions for last. It had been 10 minutes since Meghan left the set, again. The studio lights dimmed slightly, the audience whispering among themselves. Some thought it was over. Some hoped it was. Kevin O'Sullivan sat perfectly still behind his desk, flipping through his notes as if he were reviewing a grocery list, not recovering from a nationally televised meltdown. But then, the studio door burst open, hard, and Meghan Markle charged back onto the set, this time without hesitation. She wasn't calm, She wasn't composed. She wasn't trying to play nice anymore. Her blazer was unbuttoned, her hair slightly tousled, and her eyes were cold fury. She marched straight to the desk but didn't sit. Kevin didn't look surprised. If anything, he seemed mildly amused. "Third time's the charm," he offered, voice smooth. Meghan didn't smile. "No, this time I finished what I came here to say." Kevin nodded slowly. "Please, by all means, finish." She leaned forward, hands flat on the desk. "You think because you're sitting behind that desk you have power over me? That you can interrupt, twist, bait, and manipulate, and I'll just smile and take it?" Kevin folded his hands, voice calm as ever. "You agreed to this interview, Meghan. You knew what show you were walking into." She fired back. "I didn't agree to be attacked, slandered, or disrespected." Kevin raised an eyebrow. "Disrespected? You've been dismissive, sarcastic, evasive, and arrogant since the moment you sat down. Respect is earned, not demanded." Meghan sneered. "I don't need to earn anything from you." "Clearly," Kevin said, "you'd rather bulldoze through questions than answer them." A ripple of tension shot through the audience. Meghan's jaw clenched. "You've asked about my past, my family, my husband, even my marriage. What's next, Kevin? My private emails? My therapy notes? What is enough for you?" He didn't blink. "Enough would be honesty, clarity, not the brand-polished version of your life, but the real one." Meghan scoffed. "You think what I say isn't real just because it doesn't fit your narrative." "I think," Kevin said slowly, "you want to control the narrative so tightly that any challenge feels like an attack." She stepped around the desk now, standing even closer to him. "You've humiliated me on live television," she snapped. "And for what? So you can feel superior?" Kevin looked up at her, unflinching. "You humiliated yourself the moment you decided every question was beneath you." Meghan pointed at him, her voice sharp. "You don't get to question my integrity." He met her gaze. "I just did." The silence that followed was absolute. She turned to the audience suddenly, hands spread wide. "This is what happens when a woman speaks up. This is how the media treats women like me, strong, vocal, unwilling to be controlled." Kevin spoke calmly behind her. "This isn't about being strong, Meghan. This is about being accountable. Something you run from every time someone challenges your perfect victim story." She whirled around. "You call that journalism? What you do is cruelty, wrapped in a smirk and a suit." "And what you do," Kevin said coldly, "is self-promotion wrapped in a trauma tale." Gasps. She was shaking now, whether from rage, frustration, or both, no one could tell. Then Kevin struck the nerve. "I suppose next you'll sue me, or call your lawyers, or record another tearful podcast episode about being bullied by the big bad press." Meghan's voice dropped to a whisper, trembling with fury. "You think this is funny?" Kevin didn't laugh. "I think it's predictable." And then she slammed her palm on the desk, a thunderous crack that echoed off the studio walls. The audience jumped. "You're a disgrace to journalism." "And you," Kevin replied coolly, "are a masterclass in self-pity." She stared at him, breathing hard, her face flushing deeper with every second. "You don't know what it's like," she hissed, "to be chased, vilified, lied about day after day just for existing." Kevin stood slowly, finally meeting her eye to eye. "No, I don't. But I do know what it's like to be challenged, and not walk out of the room every time it gets uncomfortable." Meghan leaned closer, inches from his face. "You'll regret this." Kevin smiled, razor sharp. "Already did, the moment you walked in." That was the final crack. Meghan yanked the backup microphone off her collar, the cord whipping like a lash. She dropped it on the desk and stepped back. "Enjoy your ratings, Kevin," she said, venom dripping from each word. "You'll need them to feel important." Kevin raised his hands. "At least I don't need a royal sob story to stay relevant." The audience gasped one last time. Meghan turned to the crowd. "You're all complicit in this circus, feeding the same machine that tears people down and calls it entertainment." Kevin replied smoothly, "And you've done interviews with every one of those machines. Netflix, Oprah, Spotify. Don't play saint now." Meghan gave him one final glare. Then she turned her back, strode across the stage, and disappeared through the door for the third and final time. The silence she left behind was thicker than ever. Kevin sat down, adjusted his cuffs, and looked into the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said with icy poise, "Meghan Markle, proof that you can leave the palace, but you can't leave the entitlement." The screen faded to black once again. But this wasn't over. The studio was silent. Kevin O'Sullivan remained seated behind his desk, arms folded, his expression unreadable. The crew had stopped moving. The audience was still in their seats, as if standing up might somehow break the spell of what had just happened. 3 walkouts, 3 returns, 1 storm left to pass. Then, off camera, just barely picked up by the boom mics, a voice. It was Meghan, backstage. She wasn't shouting. No, her tone was cool, precise, and dripping with fury. "Tell him," she said to someone off-screen, likely a producer, "that I came on his show in good faith. Tell him he won't bully me into silence. And tell him he just proved every reason I left that island behind." The producer whispered something. Then her voice again, closer this time. "And tell the world," she added coldly, "that Kevin O'Sullivan is exactly what's wrong with modern media. A man so obsessed with controlling women's voices he doesn't even realize how small he sounds." The words slithered through the air, reaching Kevin through the wall. He turned his head slightly, catching every syllable. His jaw tensed, but his face remained composed. He waited. The audience waited. And then he stood, facing the camera directly. "No response to her last words," the producer called from behind the lens. Kevin looked into the camera with a faint smirk and spoke with the clarity of a man who'd waited the entire show for this moment. "Oh, I've got one." He took one breath, one beat, and then, "If challenging contradictions makes me the villain, so be it. But Meghan Markle doesn't fear bullies. She fears mirrors." A stunned gasp rippled through the audience like an aftershock. But Kevin wasn't finished. He leaned slightly toward the camera, his eyes sharp. "She came here expecting applause. She got questions. She left in a fury. That's not journalism's failure. That's entitlement's tantrum. Applause didn't come immediately. It was too soon, too much, too raw. But then 1 clap, then 2, then a cautious round of stunned, scattered clapping, the kind that doesn't celebrate. It releases tension." Kevin sat back down, calmly stacking his notes. Then, with a look that danced between satisfaction and exhaustion, he closed the show. This was supposed to be a conversation. It became a confrontation. But perhaps now some clarity. He turned slightly, glancing off stage where Meghan had vanished. "To those watching at home, we'll let you decide what just happened. But one thing is certain." He raised a finger slowly. "This wasn't an interview. It was a reckoning." The screen faded to black. Slowly this time. But the broadcast wasn't quite over. From backstage, a final sound was heard before the feed cut completely. It was Meghan's voice, low, clipped, almost whispered. "He'll regret this. One day, he'll regret this." Fade out. What did you think about this explosive 4-part showdown between Meghan Markle and Kevin O'Sullivan? Was Kevin too harsh, or was Meghan simply unprepared for real questions? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like the video if you were glued to your seat, subscribe for more dramatic and unfiltered celebrity confrontations, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next time truth and ego collide.